lights go dim, it's time to find out what's within. Behind the camera, there's so much more. With the Andy Games, let's explore. Behind the camera with Andy Games, meet the streamers, learn their names. Off the screen, who are they? Tune in now, don't delay.
Hello everybody and welcome to Behind the Camera with Andy Games. This is the podcast where I interview people in the world of content creation and beyond with the sole purpose of getting to know the person a little bit better behind the camera. In this episode, I sat down with Tyler Foley. Tyler Foley is a remarkable and versatile performer with a broad range of experiences in film, television and stage. With an acting career that began at the tender age of 6, Tyler has since made unforgettable appearances on productions including Freddy vs. Jason, Door to Door, Carrie, and the Tony Award-winning musical Ragtime. Not only is he a veteran podcast guest with more than 300 episodes under his belt, but he is also the #1 best-selling author of The Power to Speak Naked and managing director of Total Buy-In, where he works closely with executives and CEOs to help them better engage their audience when presenting by connecting their personal stories to their leadership style. Tyler is a father, husband, son, and performer in that order. Some days he feels like he has dabbled in every industry on the planet, from oil and gas, to aviation, to film and television, but that diverse experience is what has made him so versatile. Regardless of the industry or the titles he has held, what they all had in common was promoting and encouraging people to be heard and understood. The skills and resources he has garnered along the way have enabled him to become an entertaining professional speaker and a knowledgeable trainer who inspires others to reach for their dreams. With his distinct and direct style, Tyler is emerging as one of North America's sought-after leaders in the field of public speaking for personal and professional development and would welcome the opportunity to be on your show and discuss the lessons he has learned and the grace he has discovered in each event of his life. Here is the interview. Tyler, welcome to Behind the Camera with Andy Games. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm doing good, Andy. And a good afternoon to you from sunny Alberta, Canada.
Love to hear that. Love to hear that. Not somewhere I've ever been, but somewhere I know I would love to go. And I have to say, I can kind of match the sort of levels of sunshine here today in the rainy, usually rainy UK, which is kind of a nice sort of vibe to have right now. So let's just get straight into it. Like you have had quite the extensive career path. You have been you've actor, you've been performing for 35 years, 10 years in safety and keynote speaking, and of course others such as being a stuntman and an engineer. So like, can you give us like a whistle stop tour of this and your experiences and how all of these like things connected together?
To say, if 6-year-old me could have looked forward, it would have seemed a very circuitous journey. But looking back on it, it's a fairly straight line. So as you had alluded to, I was a child performer. I started on stage when I was 6 years old, got into film and television in my late teens, have been performing for over 35 years now. We're coming up into our 40th,
Wow, yeah.
40th year of it. So it's been a long career in that regard. But like anything, that ebbs and flows. And so when I was in my mid-20s, I technically retired from acting and took all the money that I had made during the 2-decade career and went back to school and got an engineering discipline, specialized in civil engineering, specifically photogrammetry and aerial survey, and built my first company around that. That company quite literally crashed and burned overnight. Wow. And so then, as part of the pivots and things, when you're in that line of work in geomatics, your primary client is usually oil and gas and or government. Both of them require that you have some form of auditable safety system. So I had to develop a safety program for my first company. When it failed, I still had all the program training of how to build and develop a safety program. And a good friend of mine threw me a lifeline. He said, I need a safety officer, safety manager for this big project that I have going up in the oil sands up in northern Alberta. and it was a multi-year contract, lots and lots of money. He was able to just kind of like throw me a big paycheck and make it seem like I was doing him a favor when in reality he was doing me a huge
Yeah.
one. And so then I got the safety training under my belt and expanded my knowledge base in that. Went back to school for that. Got another diploma and now degree under my belt, and moved into safety. And then what was interesting was, what I found about safety was a lot of what I knew about safety I'd learned in film and television when, as you had alluded to, I was doing stunt work. And I was doing stunt work before they were having safety meetings, as like a planned thing. It was just a thing that all stunt coordinators did because they didn't want to be the coordinator who had an incident on during their setup, and they wanted to make sure that all their stunt guys walked away safely, because it looks really bad when they have to fill
Yeah.
out the paperwork for the production. And so I'd learned a lot about safety without knowing that I was learning about safety. I thought I was learning about stunts. And that translated really well into my safety career. And then because I have a performance background, I ended up doing a lot of safety presentations, a lot of safety training. A lot of them were attended by some higher up executives. And that led into a career doing keynote presentations, which ironically, now that I have a 9-year-old daughter and she's gotten into film and television, I've gotten back into film and television because I ended up playing her dad in a couple of different
Oh wow.
commercials, TV shows. And my agent was like, you can just do this. And being self-employed, I have the freedom and flexibility now to kind of dictate my own schedule.
Yeah.
So I can audition when I want to, take roles when I want to, or not. And depending on what my schedule is. So that's been really rewarding in how I got to where I am now.
That's incredible. Like, and it sounds like as if acting, performing is something that, even though you said that you retired from it at one point, you never really do you? Especially with your daughter being in it, and like by proxy that you back in it as well. Like it's, I actually
Yeah,
love that. I'm sorry, go on.
no, I was going to say stage is the mob. You think you can leave, but it just brings you back in.
Yeah. Like what I love about your story there is that it looks as though everything's kind of been intertwined in some way, and like in essence it's all come full circle. Like started on the stage, now back on the stage, but then even with your being a public speaker, a keynote speaker and all, like that obviously has its connections into being in that sort of performing role, whether it be a stuntman or an actor, where you're in front of people, you are doing a job, you're telling a story, delivering a message, whatever it may be. And did you find that when you got into speaking that you already had the tools from working in performing, or did you find that like it was a little bit different in its own way?
Oh, yes and no and yes. I had the toolkit to be a good keynote speaker, but it is a different beast. Um, uh, Particularly because I now have both the freedom and curse of getting to say my own words as opposed to somebody else's.
Mm-hmm.
When I was performing, right, you get a script, somebody hands you what you're supposed to say, and people will respond to somebody else's words. So you give life to those words, but a lot of what you're doing is heavily influenced by others, including the other performers on the stage. It's a real collaborative effort,
Yeah.
right? The director has their vision and they cast people that they feel will help bring that vision to life, and then you work and play with all these other individuals. Where when you're a keynote presenter, although there is a small amount of collaboration with it, it really is, the onus is on you to bring something to that stage and to leave that audience better than you found them. And the only person that can do that is you. So that takes a little bit of learning how to properly present information, how to be an engaging speaker, how to be able to tell your story and other stories in a manner that is free flowing but connected.
Yeah.
Les Brown says it better than anybody else I know. You never make a point without a story, and you never tell a story without a point. And when you can do that, that is the essence of being and the key to being a good keynote speaker. So learning to do that was a bit of an adjustment, because for a long time I thought, well, I'm an actor, I can get up and say anything. Oh man, did I learn quickly that is the death nail of any person who thinks they can be a public speaker. Well, I can just speak about anything. No, you can speak about one thing and get really good at that one thing. Otherwise, you have no idea and you're just going to rattle on.
Yeah, like it's fascinating to me the difference in that, because like the way you put it as well, you know, it's the difference between somebody else's words and your own words that you're putting out. Like, and it's almost as if, you know, when you're performing, you're almost like protected by the script. It's less so the words and but more how you deliver it. Whereas when you are up on a stage speaking, it's you don't have that protection anymore. You are it's how you deliver it, and it's how you've written your own words, and like that's quite like an interesting difference. So in
Well,
terms
and then the
of,
funny thing is too is that the therein lie the similarity too, is that when you're delivering those words, you have to treat it like a script.
yeah,
You don't, but and the difference with keynote speaking though is you don't want to be memorized. So like when most amateurs who do public speaking, where they fail is trying to memorize a script, and then there's no room for deviation, there's no room for improv. But at the same time, you need to follow a story structure. So there needs to be that element of storytelling where you have plot development and you have introduction of characters and you have character development, and you go through that hero's journey. So it's the really it's its own unique blend. It's the same way that stand-up comedy, which frankly, in my opinion, is the hardest form of performance art out there. um, Really good comics understand storytelling,
yeah,
and they tell you micro stories in 30-second, 60-second, and 2-minute clips where they tie in story elements, and that's where the humor comes from. So it's really interesting that way.
yeah, absolutely, and yeah, I have a lot of respect for stand-up comics for that reason as well, because it's one of those things like you alluded to. Is like, say, oh, I'm an actor, I could do speaking publicly. I kind of think at some point in everybody's life, the sort of funny person in the group definitely thinks I could be a comedian, and it's just like I know for a fact I've had that thought in my life, but then I kind of was like, it's like no, I mean I could crack a good joke at times, but could I stand on a stage and talk to people? Absolutely not.
That's the thing. There's a difference between having a humorous nature and having the ability to joke or have comedic timing on the fly. But and that I've had that same as a thought where I'm like, oh well, I'm naturally funny. I could be a comedian, and I've had the the pleasure and horror of doing a few open mics, because a good friend of mine is actually a very, very, very accomplished, very funny comic, and Drew Howard. If anybody wants to look him up, super super funny. Um, totally unknown, because he, like most comics, it's been 20 years for him to develop his craft, if not more. And he's really, he's made a serious go of it over the last 10 years,
Yeah,
but he's still, working material in clubs where there's 10 and 15 people showing up. Like it's a hard go, but he makes all 10 and 15 laugh,
yeah.
where I'll go up and do an open mic and I might get a chuckle, like a quick little giggle here out of politeness because we're Canadian. Beyond that, it's he's got it and he understands how that works. And so again, it's all of these things are related in that there's a performance element to it, but each one has its own unique elements that need to be mastered before you can really do it at a high professional level.
Yeah, absolutely. And like what I love about that is the fact that like in terms of any type of performing, it has its differences. It's not just a one size fits all kind of approach. And I suppose in a sense it's why when it comes to like a lot of actors, you see actors who are strictly comedy actors, strictly action heroes kind of thing? Because could you imagine Will Ferrell as an action hero?
Yeah, because he did get hard, didn't he? No,
So,
I'm kidding. That's not an action film. But yeah, no, and or not only that, but even let's say Will Ferrell decided to get cut, which I would love to see the
yeah,
jacked up Will
I,
Ferrell.
yeah,
Because I mean he embraces that gut of his in a lot of his humor. But we'll say he got jacked up. Who would take him seriously? Because he's spent all that time. It's kind of like Ben Stiller has recently kind of moved away from comedic roles
yeah,
and tried to take on a little bit more serious tone. And it's been a really hard go for him to make that shift. Um, Ironically, Bruce Willis was considered a comedic actor, right? Because
yeah,
moonlighting and some of the stuff that he'd done before, it wasn't until he did Die, and it was a push for him to be able to do Die Hard. John McTiernan had to fight, like really fight the studio because they did not want Bruce Willis in. And I'm pretty sure they had a clause in there where after like the first week, if they didn't like the dailies, they were going to pull him. So John McTiernan filmed a lot of the really intensive stuff up front, just so he could. I'm pretty sure so that he could demo
yeah.
it. Don't quote me on that. I feel like I'm pulling that from a whole bunch of random sources, and it could be a Chat GPT hiccup at this point. But I'm pretty sure. I know for a fact that Bruce Willis wasn't the first, second,
Yeah.
or third choice
Wow.
for Die Hard, um, and that they really had to fight his reputation as a comedic actor before they took him. And now, can you imagine Bruce Willis going in a different direction other than real good action?
No, absolutely not. That's interesting. I never knew that about. Although I feel like I remember seeing something like an old video of him, and he also did like musical performances, I believe, as well.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
he's a great musician, and man, can that man play a harmonica? Like he is a good blues musician. And he used to do stuff like that was one of the reasons why he got involved with the Hard Rock Cafe.
Hmm.
And like he would when they were first doing the promotion with that, he would go up and he would play live sets. So yeah, no, I mean that's a man who has multi talents. But again, he started as a comedic star, and even a lot of his action roles, his best action roles have a comedic flair element to it. One of the most underrated shows that he ever did, and to this day, I don't know why it's so hated, is Hudson Hawk. Like that is a really good film and is just a wonderful blend of action and humor, and even his humor that he puts into Fifth Element, which is probably one of
Yeah.
his better action roles.
100%.
Or look at like a lot of the stuff that he did in the original Die Hard. A lot of the comedy in that was improv
Yeah.
that he added on. A lot of that wasn't actually in the original script. So, he's good, but he's made that niche for himself, and that's really. In any performance, no matter what you do, whether you're film, television, stage, keynote speaker, whether you're a comic or a mime, you're putting in uh it's all a reflection of you and what you bring to that performance and to those characters that you're developing or whatever.
Yeah, of course. Now, now that you break it down about Bruce Willis, there it makes so much more sense, especially when you say Fifth Element. Like I think that's definitely my top five movies of all time for me. And I'm just the scenes when he's driving his taxi. It's like yeah,
Yeah.
it's right there in front of you. No, it makes sense. So then take that then with yourself and your sort of acting performances then back in the day when you did it, or even sort of going forward. What sort of like roles would you have preferred, and like would you have like sort of put yourself more of yourself into the roles, just regardless of the size of the role, or made it your own kind of thing? What was the sort of structure like for you?
So it's funny, I most of my IMDb page is filled with assholes and gay guys. And I am a heterosexual, I'd like to think fairly nice dude. And but I think all of them I tried to. One of the things that I learned very early on, um, and I think it was an interview that I saw. I want to say with Gary Oldman, it was one of those like the inside the actor's studio interviews, which
Mm,
I love. I consume those like I'm going out of style. Like I just love hearing other performers talk about their craft and their insecurities and their struggles and what how they perceive their career. It's always fascinating to me. But I'm pretty sure it was the interview with Gary Oldman where he said, because he's been very uh, typecast as a villain
yeah,
because he does villain so good. And I think in reality, Gary Oldman is closer to Commissioner Gordon style character.
yeah,
Quiet, reserved, intelligent, but nice when
yeah,
everything
100%.
is said and done. Or even like, I think when he was Tinker Tailor, Soldier Spy, um, uh, I think he's a very methodical human being. I wouldn't know, I've never met him, but what I get from the interviews where a long format interview where you get to really see more of him.
Yeah,
Um, but he had said that no matter how, and I'm paraphrasing, like no matter how evil or mean the character was, um, that he had to find the humanity in them. Like something actually drives that person.
yeah.
And I think he even referenced the Fifth Element when he was talking about it, saying that his character in the Fifth Element was the closest to pure evil,
Oh,
where
yeah,
the motivations were your comic book villain, and yet still he had that moment with the cherry and moments of humanity and realize. I remember I think he was talking about the key to that scene was somebody facing their own mortality and what could be more human or
yeah,
universal than that. And I remember thinking how true that is because no matter who you're playing, they have a motivation, and that motivation isn't just out of pure evil. People do things for what they feel are the right reasons. We never do things because we feel that they're wrong. No matter how wrong that thing is perceived by everybody else, there is a justification to us that makes it right. And I think that's what I tried to bring to all the characters. I know I played um, in uh, like a reenactment show, like those true crime
yeah.
reenactment ones. I had two roles on a series called Sex, Lies, and Murder. And the people, particularly the one, they were uh, just bad human beings.
Yeah.
Like nothing redeemable about them on the surface. And yet they still did the things they did for some justification. So that was a real struggle for me to try and find humanity within that. And ironically, a lot of I know for the one that I really struggled playing was a guy who uh, was in an incestuous relationship with his daughter,
Wow.
and then ended up killing. They got pregnant, had another child, and he ended up killing the his daughter, what would be his son slash grandson, and his daughter's adopted father, and then killed himself.
Wow.
And ironically, as horrible and as heinous as that all sounds, he, as weirdly and as warped as it is, he did it out of love.
Hmm.
And that's a really hard thing to reconcile as a human being who would never do something like that, but still having to portray something like that. And
Yeah.
I tried. I remember being on set and trying to um, bring that to the role. Like, just remember that this guy, as misguided as he is doing all of these horrible, horrible acts because his brain can't comprehend or rationalize what his heart is feeling.
Yeah. That makes sense. Like, and I've actually spoken to someone before about something quite similar. Is that Terry Brown? She's a writer, and she was saying about when she's writing a villain into her stories, they have to have these like sort of elements of humanity and things that can like almost make them redeemable in a sense, because then there's that kind of relatability of humanity with the reader, and it's a case where it's like you're not like rooting for them, but you know that there is something about them that makes them human despite doing all these like inhumane things. And so that's like quite interesting that you say that. But so with the like the crime reconstruction shows, what's it like acting out a scene like that? Because obviously it's a sort of a when you're watching the show, it's like you see like the video, but there's like this sort of voiceover for it describing what's happening. It's more for like a visual cue, but obviously, you know, as you say, you have to act it out. You have to portray this person doing all these vile things, but for something that's kind of almost overshadowed by a voice, how do you like sort of get into the mindset for that, for something like that's incredible. I've always actually wondered about this because someone has to act it out, but yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, the hardest part is not the performance that I bring to
Mm-hmm.
it. Um, one of the interesting things I've taken a few seminars with Dr. John DeMartini, and he does a really cool program called the Breakthrough Experience. And one of the things that he discusses in it is, there are, I can't remember how many, but dozens of different emotions that humans can feel, and dozens of different traits that we can take on. And you list out all the different ones, and then you check off all the times where you have felt and or done something like that. And the reality is when we break it down, we we have all done things that we're not proud of, and we've all done things that we're incredibly proud of. We've all had incredibly joyous experiences and feelings, and we've had incredibly sorrowful and sad experiences and feelings. And so we are all of us, no matter who you are, what human you are, what your experience through life has been, capable of great achievements and great disasters. And it's really interesting when you break it down to see that. So for me to be able to tap into some of those darker emotions or baser instincts is something that I can do, because we can all do it.
Yeah.
That's not the difficult thing. The difficult thing is bringing that performance to life in a realistic and believable way with another human being.
Yeah.
And to be able to have a cognitive disconnect between the two, because you're doing a scene, and in that scene it has to feel real.
Yeah.
But then when they call cut, there needs to be some healing to that. Um, and actually, one of the greatest experiences I had uh, with the director was working on The Order with Jude Law. And we did this white supremacist rally. And they had to have had 400 or 500 extras
Yeah.
in that day. And I played the right hand of a basically a cult leader who was pushing white supremacy, and had given the speech, and then the main character stood up and kind of took over, saying, that there needs to be more action behind the words. And it was a really really hate filled um scene,
Yeah.
but it was necessary for the plot. And I remember watching Nicholas Holt do the scene, and just being in awe, because you couldn't help but get like sucked into these words. Like,
No.
he did such a good job. And I remember talking to him when we were down in Holding, and he was like, "Oh, I hate doing stuff like this." I'm like, "Yeah, no, me too. Like, I get it. And I feel bad for you, because you really have to be the face of it. I just get to stand off on the side and do a couple of sea Kyles and be okay." Um, God, somebody is going to take that clip at some point and take it so out of context. Oh wow! I just realized what I just did.
I promise I won't leave that as a standalone clip, just as like an
Okay, fine.
expose
But
kind
anyway,
of thing.
yeah, exactly. But he was, I was having that conversation with him, and then we did this scene, and it was a really negatively charged scene. And then the director Justin came afterwards, and usually directors don't directly address background performers. Like, that's usually done through the first AD, and the director doesn't actually talk to background. But at the end of this film day, and it was a long film day, it's probably 10 or 12 hours, he gathered everybody into this main hall where we were filming, and he said, listen, I want to thank you all for your professionalism and what you did, um, and what you've brought to the scene. It's a very pivotal scene and we needed to get it. And he said, and I appreciate how dark the material is that we are discussing and how hard that might be for most of us to portray that kind of hate when really we don't feel that. He said, and I know that all of the main cast really appreciate what you brought because that gave us the energy to be able to feed off of it. He said, but that's a really negative energy and we can't leave that in the world.
Yeah.
So I want to take the next 5 minutes and I want everybody to turn to one another and just tell everybody that you love them and that we love each other, and that, that this was just make believe. And everybody did, and like people were crying and hugging. I don't really feel that way. I'm so sorry. And I love you. And he recharged the room. Greatest thing I've ever seen a director ever do. And I, as a performer, I appreciated it so much because, again, going back to some of those true crime creations, I remember doing this one scene with this. And you just meet these people, right? Like, especially those true crime creations, because they're usually low budget, non-union. The people who are doing it are just getting into the craft. And I just kind of had punked my way in there because I had stepped away from the union and hadn't gotten back to the union. So I was able to do some non-union stuff, but I've been performing for 25 years. So I was booking a lot of these roles. And this girl, she was new. Like, she was like 23, 24. I was in my late 30s, and I had to play this abusive husband who like punches holes through the walls and like chokes her and like throws her up. And we had an intimacy coordinator, but we didn't really have a stunt coordinator, and I knew how to do it. So I was like kind of coaching people how to go through this stuff. And I remember telling her, I'm like, listen, you have the power in this. I want you to know that in this performance, this is how we're going to do it. This is like, you are going to hold my hands and it's all, you're going to mime. I'm just going to try and I'm going to react off of you to try and make it look as real, but you are in control the whole time. And she's like, okay. And then after every take, it was all I could do, because you have to get so angry and so mad and like be doing this stuff. And after every take, I'd stop and I would step back and I would say, are you okay? Do you need a break? Because if you don't want, if you're like, just because they want to do more takes doesn't mean you have to do more takes.
Of course.
Are you okay? How do you feel? And I had to check in, because, again, same thing that Justin was saying, you have to bring the love to that. And those are the really difficult ones, because you don't know how somebody else is going to react. And as much as it's make believe and in play, you don't know what they're bringing as part of their lived experience into that role. And you got to be very careful. And they're probably some of the hardest things to do as a performer.
Yeah, of course. And especially because, like you say, you're bringing those things to life that you don't necessarily believe, you don't feel, but you have to bring it to life and make it as convincing as possible. And on that as well, actually, let's sort of flip the script here to your experience as a stuntman, because that is, as well, is making things look real, but in a more physical sense. So how did you make the transition from actor to stuntman and then back to actor? Like, what got you specifically into the sort of stunt side of things? And obviously, like you said at the very start, you found that there was a lot of links with your safety qualifications as well. And so, like, what was the whole sort of idea behind the stuntman, and how did you get into that?
Well, so I want to put an asterisk onto this, and a quick shout out to guys like Nick Barrick, who really helped mentor me along with stunts, and JJ Macro and Scott Atea, and some of the stunt coordinators that I got to work with, John Sampson, who took a performer who is then able to do stunts. Like, I'm an actor who is capable of doing my own stunts. I am not a stunt man per se. And I know a lot of times in my bios, they're like, oh, I'm stunt man because I'm credited with doing stunts. And so that makes you a stunt man. But the reality is, uh, I was really privileged to work with some incredible stunt professionals who allowed me to play with them uh, in very controlled circumstances. So I got to do they love, like, when I get to do stunt fights, it's always fun because I'm tiny. Because like in it's hard to tell in the framing and everything, but I'm 5'7" and 135 pounds. When I was younger, I was even lighter than that, still the same height. So when you throw me through a window, I go through a window. Like you can really huck me, right? And so, or like it makes somebody else look like I'm even meaner, badder guy because they're hulking
Yeah.
over me. And then when they beat me down, it's just like whatever. Or you flip it, like if ever I get to like actually like spar with somebody and I get to be the hero, um, really looks good because then I knock somebody twice my size out. Um, but really, what I got to do and specialize in was ratchet pulls and high falls,
Mhm.
because being small, when you push me off a building just because of scale, if I'm doubling somebody who's say like 6 foot or 6'1", and you insert in a 5'7", 5'8" guy, optically it's not much, but it just makes that fall visually seem longer, or at
Mhm.
least make the expanse of the place that you're falling from seem bigger because of scale.
Okay.
And so I got to do a couple of high falls. I got to do a couple of ratchet pulls. Got to do some precision driving, and all of that came about just because I expressed interest.
Okay.
As an actor, I mean, people who are coming on to this, Andy, will never they're gonna have to Google me to know. They're not like, oh, I know you. You're that guy in that thing. Now they're probably gonna check out the order and they'll like see me in the brief thing and be like, oh, that guy was on Andy's podcast. But like, you really have to know my work to know my work. Um, and so as a working actor, although I was very blessed in that I was one of the very small percentage of unionized actors who was actually making a full-time career of just acting, you're still doing you're on set, but you're not necessarily always in front of the camera. So
Yeah.
you're doing background work, or you're doing stand-in work, or you're doing photo double work or stunt work. And I I because I have a love of the craft and a love of the medium, I would avail myself to all the people. Like I would ask the stunt coordinators, "Oh, why do you do it that way? What can I help?" That was usually my first thing. "Hey, I would love to help. What can I do? I don't need to do the stunt. Do you need help with the rigging? Do you need help uh, I used to specialize in box falls, but before I ever got to do my first high fall, I was actually helping the stunt coordinator. The first high fall I ever did was for a coordinator named Robin Webb, and I helped him build the cardboard boxes because a lot of people think all these high falls are into airbags, and you do some of the higher ones into airbags, but most of the falls that you see that are between, say, 20 and 60 feet, they're actually not into airbags because airbags are like massive. They're a
Yeah.
story and a half, 2 stories tall. So if you're trying to do a 20-foot high fall, you would never fall because the bag would be in the way. So you actually fall into cardboard boxes. And one of the first things I ever did working in stunts was actually build these 1 by 1 by 2 cardboard boxes and stack them. In this case, I think 8 feet tall. Yeah, it was 8 rows of boxes, and that was kind of like the first thing that I did with stunts. It was
Yeah.
just making myself available, and because again, I love all things film. Like I remember working with an incredible stunt guy who unfortunately is no longer with us, Rick Faraci, kung fu guy, martial artist, swordsman. He was actually years after I'd worked with him on the first season of Canada's Got Talent, which is like Britain's Got Talent, only in Canada. Go figure. America's Got Talent. And he went on doing his swordsmanship, and he didn't go very far in the competition, but I know he made it through a couple of rounds. And just getting to work with him and like, how can I help? Oh, can you do these things? Can you set up this gear? Can you do this stuff here? Like, it was just making myself available to
Yeah.
these professionals who then were willing to throw me a bone every once in a while when they got a fun thing to do. And hey, Tyler, do you want to get thrown through this window on this Western? Do you want to get pulled through the air on iRobot and do this ratchet pull? Hells yes, please let me do that.
Yeah, I think that's testament to the fact as well. Like, if you don't ask, you don't get. Like, as cliche as that is, but it's so true because, like, especially in kind of film and thing, it saves them having to hire somebody else to do it. If somebody's willing to do it, they're like, yeah, and then obviously that opens up so many doors for yourself, which it clearly did. Like, being able to sort of work on strictly stunt work or even acting
Yeah.
in other roles. And I also have to say, I'm quite amazed at the fact that if you're jumping off, like, doing like a 60-foot high fall, it's cardboard boxes. Like that, I think that takes a lot of confidence, like for real.
No, it doesn't. It takes a lot of stupidity. Yeah. No, yeah, I'll tell you, I used to do it and feel really comfortable doing it. And now that I'm a safety professional, and ironically, I actually instruct fall protection,
Mhm.
and elevated work platform, and working from some of these heights as a safety ticket that I can provide people. And now that I do that, I remember being up in an elevated work platform, a man basket, guiding a student, and they just froze, the absolute panic, and I had to take over and bring the basket down. And at that point, we were, I think, 3 or 4 stories, so we wouldn't have been quite at the 60-foot mark, probably closer to like 40. But he was having his panic, and I remember trying to talk him down and looking over the edge and myself thinking, well, I wouldn't want to fall from here. And then when I finally realized how tall we were and the fact that I had jumped from higher heights, uh, it made me realize that the older I get, the more I'm aware of my own mortality, the and my own fallibility, the less likely I would be to do it now. If one of the stunt coordinators were to phone me up right now and be like, "Hey Tyler, do you want to jump off a building?" I would flat out, absolutely, positively say no. I don't need to. But one of the reasons why I wanted to get into stunts in the first place was because you are well compensated for conquering the fear.
Yeah.
You're not fearless in any way, but you do have to have a good sense of calm and situational awareness. One of the neat things about doing the high falls too is that everything slows down and then ramps up. It, like, when you're in the fall, it's it's kind of like bullet time in the Matrix, where like
Yeah.
everything just kind of freezes and you're aware of where you are in space and time. And then as you get closer and closer and closer to hitting the boxes or hitting the bag and hitting your mark, there's just this ramp up in speed where that last microsecond when because what you don't ever fall into your face, right? So you do, like, you're falling forward,
Hmm.
and then at the very last minute you kind of roll your shoulder and you tuck, and then you starfish out to try and get as wide as you possibly can, to lessen the impact. You want to take out as many boxes as you can. That's usually the goal and the aim. Take out as many boxes as you can. And in that last second, that it just kind of goes, and like everything speeds up, and then it's like in fast forward. It's just like, oh. And then that, like, when you're in the fall, I know, like, when I'm getting ready for the stunt, my heart's racing, and then I have to breathe and I have to slow it down, find the calm, find the relax. They hear, cameras rolling, action, and then you gotta anticipate when the action is, because you can't waste film, or at least now it's digital, so it's a little bit easier to take your time and be like, okay, now I'm going to jump. But when we were doing it on film, there's only so much film.
Yeah.
So when rolling, speed, background, action, when they said action, you couldn't stutter. So, like, you had to, like, as that, I got so used to hearing those words and using them to find my focus and find my calm, that when I actually did fall forward, my heart was at a really low beat, like 50, 55 beats per minute. Really, really calm. And then through the fall, you'd maintain that calm. But as soon as I hit the bag, burst of adrenaline, 180 beats per minute, 200 beats per minute. You're like, oh, oh, that was dumb. But I loved doing it because, again, as a professional and as a performer, it was a great way to augment my performance income
Yeah.
because you would get a stunt adjustment, and stunt performers do a lot and put their body through a lot, and there's a lot that goes into it. So like when I do a high fall, it wasn't just the day, right? There was 3 months of training that would lead up to that, a
Oh,
minimum of
wow.
2 months of training. And you'd be at the gym every day, so you'd get that paycheck, and it was like a 10 or 12 or $15,000 paycheck.
Oh, wow.
Except for I did 3.5 months of training for that. So when you aggregate it over, you're like, well, that's about a regular, normal full-time job. There you go. But it was a good way to do it. So I was just blessed to work with some great people who allowed me to have a glimpse into their world and do some things with them that I wouldn't have normally otherwise got a chance to do.
Yeah, of course, of course. And one thing you said there that I particularly liked was you said that you're compensated for conquering the fear of doing these things, and I think that kind of like leads us nicely into your number one best-selling book, The Power to Speak Naked. What can you tell us about that? Like about the writing process for that? Like, where did the inspiration for that come from? Like, obviously, you have had that experience where you have been around people, speaking with people in all aspects of your career. But then, what was the inspiration for the book?
So the catalyst for it was people asking me how I do what I do. So a lot of times I'll get up and I'll speak and I'll present. I've emceed a half a dozen of my friends' weddings. I've actually officiated more than my fair share of weddings for friends because they're like, You'll do it better." It's like, okay. They'll like interview other officiants and they'll be like, "Yeah, but my friend Tyler probably would do this better. Tyler, would you do this?" And then I have to go and get my 1 day license and go and officiate my friends' weddings. And I do love doing it. But a lot of times people would ask me, complete strangers, like I would go up and give a presentation and people would ask, "How do you do that? How do you do that?" And I'd end up giving the same advice over and over again. So that was the catalyst of the book. The inspiration for the book was actually my agent telling me if I wanted to book better speaking gigs that I needed to have a book to sell. So that was the inspiration. That was the real push to do it. And then the writing process was super easy because my book was first published in 2017 or 2018. I self-published it. I've actually been picked up by Morgan James because David, who is the president of Morgan James, was at a seminar that I was lucky enough, again, knowing people who know people. It was actually Les Brown's workshop. He had a 2.5 day workshop. But for anybody who knows who Les Brown is, he's been living with cancer for the better part of coming up 3 decades now, I
Oh,
think.
wow.
And an incredible human being, great survivor, just an amazing person. But every once in a while, he has to make a trip to the hospital that he didn't plan. And I'm good friends with the promoter of that event, and she phoned me up last minute and she was like, "Tyler, do you mind? Les has to step out for an hour or two. Can you fill in and try to just make it so people don't know?" I was like, "Sure." One of the people that happened to be in the audience was the owner of Morgan James, so he picked up my book and then got it now published. But when I was originally writing the book, and like I said, in 2017, 2018, we still had all the different technological things that we have now, including voice to text. And
Yeah.
I'm a speaker. So I actually didn't write my book. I spoke my book. I,
Oh,
I basically dictated what the words were going to be. And then I had a really good team that took a lot of that stuff. We took a lot of my video and transcribed it and then augmented it with a couple of what do you think of this, Tyler? And I just recorded it. So one of the nice things about the blessings of the book and one of the drawbacks of the book is it is quite literally in my own voice.
yeah.
And as anybody who will have listened to this interview will know, I ramble. So the book tends to repeat itself and ramble a little bit, but it is definitely my voice. And those who have read it, one of the consistent feedback that we get from the book is always that it is a very easy read. It's very easy to understand. Some of the people, I hate it that it loops back on itself, but we've heard time and time again that people really like that because it reinforces the concept. And maybe they didn't understand it at first, but when they get through the book and they've heard
Yeah.
it 3 or 4 times, then it starts to sink. So that's always good. And I'm my worst critic, like anybody else is. Like I read my book and I'm like, oh man, oh. But then I get the feedback and I'm like, you know what? This book isn't written for me, and I have
Yeah.
to remember that all the time. That this book was written for the people who struggle doing what comes naturally and easy to me, to help them so that it comes naturally and easy to them. And so in that, I always have to remind myself, I am not my target audience for my book.
Yeah.
The people who struggle are, and those people tend to get a lot out of it, and that's why it was written.
Yeah, brilliant, and I love that. Like, it's like one of those things where you're rereading it, re-listening to it, and think, oh, this loops back a little bit too much, and then when people come to you and say, oh yeah, I learned, but then it made me understand it better, you're like, I meant that. I totally meant that at the time.
Totally. It's
But
all
like,
part of the plan.
but like jokes aside, like I think that's a sort of a testament to how organic the book would have been written, because if you've spoke the book out, you're speaking from your experiences and what you've learned as a speaker, especially going from in the side of performing and acting, and like obviously we talked about the differences before, and I kind of think that makes it like more natural and relatable for anybody who is looking to get into public speaking. And I kind of think sort of things written like that kind of hold a lot more weight than just this is a list of facts kind of thing. And I think, especially when it comes to things like public speaking, there's no right or wrong way. It's just what works for the individual. Like same with being on a podcast or anything like that. Anything in a live setting, I would say.
Well, and I think one of the great things about that book is it is all written from my experience and my viewpoint. So these are the things that worked for me, and I
Mm-hmm.
I say it probably easily 2 to 3 dozen times throughout the book. I'm going to present you with some ideas.
Yeah.
I want you to play with them all. A couple of them are going to work. Some of them maybe not. These are the things that worked for me. I think they might help you, but it's up to you to tailor it, to figure out how you do it. Like my pre-talk routine is not going to be somebody else's pre-talk
Yeah,
routine.
absolutely.
And you have to find the thing that works for you, but there will be elements that will cross over and are the same. And you know, I want my book to be a stepping stone for people. My book is not designed to make somebody the next Tony Robbins, because I'm not Tony Robbins, but my book is definitely designed for you to step out of that
Yeah.
comfort zone and push some of those boundaries, so that the next time, my book is designed for the people when they're told by their boss that they need to give a presentation, find every excuse why they can't, and then call in sick. And that is really, really, really hindering their professional development, their personal
Yeah,
development, their career
absolutely.
trajectory, their career growth. My book is designed for those people, so that the next time the boss does, they may still have a little trepidation and a little bit of a, oh, I don't want to do that. But instead of saying no and coming up with excuses, they say yes and embrace the opportunity.
Yeah.
That's who that book is designed for.
Oh, 100%. Like I know for a fact I have been that person before who has come up with any reason and then some to not have to do that, because public speaking to me at one point was like, I mean, like you say, there is still some trepidation. Of course there is. It's never the most seamless process ever, but you can improve it. And I think what I like about that is, what you're offering is a fresh perspective that somebody has just not thought of yet, or somebody has not really kind of been experienced with. And sometimes that's all people need, because people relate to things, they resonate with things in different ways. And sometimes all it takes is just something they might not have thought about.
Or have thought about it in a different light.
Yeah.
So like a lot of what I'm presenting to people is not new information. It's presented in a way that maybe you hadn't considered before. The same way, like one of the big things that we try to break down in the book and dispel is this myth that people are afraid of public speaking, because that honestly is just not true, Andy.
Yeah,
Nobody
100%.
there. I shouldn't say nobody. It is a incredibly small fractional percentage of the population that is actually afraid of public speaking. And most of us public speak on a regular basis and just don't realize it. Anybody who's ever been to a restaurant and ordered food has spoken in public. And if they didn't know their wait staff, they spoke to a complete stranger. And if the food that they wanted came to the table, they asked for what they wanted and got it. So this notion that we're afraid to speak in public, or we're afraid to speak to strangers, or we're afraid to ask for what we want for in life is completely, totally null and void if you've ever been to a restaurant and gotten your food. And I know, like, there's people who hear it all the time because I give this same speech over and over again. Like, this is my favorite thing to say on the planet. And everyone, the gears grind to a halt, and they're all like, yeah, but Tyler, when I'm talking to my waiter or waitress in the restaurant, the restaurant isn't looking at me. That's not speaking in public. And I'm like, no, you're in a public place. That's entirely speaking in public. If your concern is that the restaurant isn't looking at you, then your fear is not speaking in public. Your fear is public judgment.
Yeah.
That the people who are then looking at you are going to negatively view the things that you ordered. And the irony is, we're, for the most part, very selfish creatures. So the majority of human beings want the best for us first. So if somebody has come to hear you talk, even if they're forced to, it's a voluntold scenario, like a mandatory boardroom meeting where maybe you've been asked to give the Q3 sales statistics. At worst, your audience is passively indifferent. There's very passively indifferent. There's very few people who would come to a meeting hoping that the speaker fails. Nobody tuned into this today, Andy, and was like, man, I hope whoever Andy has on today bombs. I hope they have absolutely nothing to say. I hope they realize that they're a fraud. I hope they forget everything, and that I walk away less served. Nobody thought that tuning in, or they just wouldn't have tuned in. And yet those are the stories that speakers often tell themselves. I'm an imposter. I'm a fraud. I don't know what I'm saying. There's somebody else who's done it bigger, better, brighter, stronger, faster than me. And all of that is nonsense. That's your story. That's not the audience's story. The audience is actually on your side. So when we get people to realize that they've never gone to a movie hoping that it would suck, even if the Rotten Tomatoes score was 1%, they still were hoping beyond hope that that movie would actually be entertained, and everybody else who had critiqued it was wrong. And they've never gone to a speaker hoping that they would fail. So this notion that you're going to be negatively judged, the person who's judging you the worst in that whole scenario is you. And the second person who's judging you the worst in that restaurant scenario is probably the wait staff, because they are going, triple stack of pancakes, huh? Okay, all right. But other than that, you're probably good to go. So yeah, that's usually what the book does, is reframe preconceived and misconceived conceptions of the world.
Yeah, incredible. And for anybody who is listening, definitely make sure to check out The Power to Speak Naked by Tyler Foley. And on that, Tyler, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on Behind the Camera with Andy Games. Thank you so much for your time. Just before we wrap up, I would just like to give you the floor just to, if you want to plug yourself, let the listeners know where they can find you. Everything will be in the show notes as well, but I just want to give you the floor for this moment in time.
Well, and I appreciate that, Andy. And as you'd said, we're going to have everything posted in the show notes, so they can just scroll down to find the best way to reach me, and that is through the website, which is SeanTylerFoley.com. Sean is spelled the proper Irish way, SeanTylerFoley.com. But before they get to that, when they're scrolling to the show notes, they have to scroll past your information first, and they'll notice that when they do that, there's a little section that has 5 blank stars and a little comment section. And that's not just there for decoration and separation of the show notes in this pretty view that we have going on right now. That's actually a functional thing that they can use to give you a 5-star review. So I would humbly ask that anybody who is listening to this and has made it to the end of my rambling, As much as Andy tried to keep me on task, and he really did, he was very polite, gave me the floor. So I would like to use this opportunity to encourage you, if you are listening to Andy Games on a regular basis, if you're coming to this podcast, I would ask that you give it a 5-star review. And then use that comment section to say why. What is some of the content that you've enjoyed? Did you enjoy the interview that he did a couple weeks ago with Alex Sanfilippo, the founder of Podmatch? If so, give it a thumbs up, give it a like, give it a 5-star review. If you liked this interview, let him know. Let him know the guests that you've really, really, really enjoyed listening to, so that he can find more guests like that. And if you give him the 5-star review and the comment, it's going to boost his show in the show rankings, which is going to help you get better guests, because bigger, better, brighter guests are going to want to come on the show. So it'll serve you as an audience. It helps Andy get more. It helps me get more visibility for this one. So everybody is helped in this scenario. Everybody gets helped in this ecosystem if you can take the moment to give a 5-star review and leave the comments why. If you're willing to do that, then if you come through to the show notes, click on SeanTylerFoley.com, come to my website as a thank you for giving Andy a 5-star review. You come to my website, and right on the top of the landing page, we have an opportunity for you to get a couple of free things from me. You get a free PDF download of The Power to Speak Naked, so you don't have to spend the $17.95 US, whatever it is, 15 pounds or $21 Canadian, whatever the book is priced at. We have it. It's in 44 countries, so find it where it's in your local bookstore and figure out what to do with that. But you don't even have to buy the book. You get the PDF download for free. We'll also give you access to my Drop the Mic speaker series, which is 7 5-minute videos that are, I promise you, if you implement the strategies that we talk about in those videos, you will be a more confident, more polished speaker. And they're quick to digest. They're 5 minutes each. So over the course of a week, over your coffee break, you can learn some real actionable steps that will make your presentations better, make you a more confident speaker. And then we give you access to my Endless Stages Facebook group, which is full of resources, great community that we've set up for like-minded individuals, growth-minded individuals to come and really share their experience public speaking. So if you're willing to give Andy a 5-star review, I'm willing to give all of those things to you for free just for leaving that review. But no 5-star review, no gifts for you.
And why wouldn't you take that deal, you know? Tyler, thank you so much for the kind words. I massively appreciate that. And once again, thank you so much for your time. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on Behind the Camera with Andy Games, and I will be sure to check out the book. I'll be sure to check out the resources as well as all the listeners should be, that we as in the little exchange that we discussed, you know. But yes, once again, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on.
Cheers. And there you have it. That was my conversation with Tyler Foley, a man who has certainly done a lot of things and has clearly been a success in everything he has done. For me, it was an incredibly refreshing insight into Tyler's experiences and really the ability to be able to do literally anything that you put your mind to. As always, this has been Behind the Camera with Andy Games. I've been your host, Andy Games. Any and all likes, shares, follows, subscriptions, etc. on all platforms are hugely appreciated. We will be back with another installment of Behind the Camera with Andy Games next week, but until then, peace.